Hello and welcome to Queerful. My name is Benjamin Rose, and today my guest is musician Linn Jennings, and it's going to be a great conversation, so stick around. Hello, dears and queers. Welcome back to Queerful. We are back after a short hiatus over the holiday season, and then with the new year, I wasn't putting any episodes out, but we are back. We're going to be back on a regular schedule. This is the first of several episodes that I have coming up in the next few months, so I'm very excited about that. Very excited to continue bringing more conversations to your eardrums that are absolutely fun for me to have as well. Queerful is a podcast that explores the many ways that LGBTQ plus folks of all stripes are creating social change, challenging power structures, inverting binaries, and thriving in a heteropatriarchal world. Today's guest is Linn Jennings. Linn Jennings is a queer acoustic singer-songwriter who recently moved to Austin, Texas from Madison, Wisconsin. She writes lyric-driven music that pulls the listener into her stories. She released her first full-length album in February of 2020, and she's continued to write and release music during the pandemic. Now, I actually met Linn a couple of years ago because we were both playing a show. I was playing with my band Cat and the Hurricane, and if you want to hear more about that, I actually interviewed my bandmates from Cat and the Hurricane on this show. It's episode 1, so you can go back and listen to that if you haven't already. That was such a fun conversation. But anyways, I was playing with Cat and the Hurricane, and Linn was playing as Linn Jennings, playing her solo acoustic stuff, and we were both in the same show. And so that was the first time we met, and we've played a couple of times since then. We were both sort of in the Madison, Wisconsin music scene, which is a really great community, and so we have a lot of mutual friends through that space, and so I've known Linn in that capacity for a little while. So Linn released her album What Lies Ahead in February of 2020, but has also been releasing music really recently. She has 2 singles, Love From Afar and Cold Heart, that she released since the pandemic, as well as a Christmas song called Holiday for Two, and all of those have been released in the past few months, and so she's continued to create music, and so I wanted to get her on the show so that we can talk about what that process has been like, because I know for artists of all kinds, this isolation and lack of sort of in-person events has been really hard, and a lot of us have had to learn how to adapt the kinds of content that we create, the ways that we engage our art and share our art with other people. And so I just wanted to sit down and have a conversation about what that experience and that journey has been like for Linn specifically. Before we jump into the interview, I also wanted to just make one note that as I am starting this show back up again and planning the next several episodes and hoping to keep a consistent schedule, and that is posting every other Monday, so you get about 2 episodes a month, I'm sort of exploring what the format of this show will continue to be. I really love the interview format because it gives me an opportunity to invite people that I know or that I have some sort of connection with and sort of dig into their stories and learn more about how they move through the world as a queer person, especially when talking to artists, to learn about their art and sort of the process that goes behind creating their art. I really love having those conversations, and it seems to me that folks enjoy hearing that as well. However, if there's any other kinds of content that I may try on here that you really like, please let me know. Please reach out to me on my social medias or shoot me an email because I want to just try things out. I know that podcasts are a sort of flexible medium and are growing in popularity, especially I think during this pandemic, because it just gives you a chance to sort of create whatever you want without time limits, and you can easily record something and post it up online and people can listen, and it's pretty simple. So I am someone who has a lot of ideas at all times and a lot of projects that are sort of on the back burner of things that I would love to do if I ever had the time or energy. So I have a lot of different things that I would love to try out on this podcast. I've thought about doing maybe some history lessons on queer individuals throughout history, maybe folks that have long since passed but who have stories that we could still learn from. perhaps doing reviews of queer media, talking about music and books and things that are coming out from the queer community. Still sort of within the ethos of what this show is about, which is highlighting the stories and diversity and beauty and ingenuity of our LGBTQ plus community, but maybe finding ways to do that beyond just the interviews. I will absolutely keep doing the interviews, but I'm just giving you a heads up that I may start to explore with some other kinds of content and throw it onto the show. So please be honest with your feedback. If there's segments that I try that you really like, then please let me know and say, hey, I really love this. I would love to hear more of it. Or if there are things that you don't find as fascinating and you'd rather I just sort of stick to the interviews, then please feel free to reach out to me and let me know that as well. This project is so fun for me to make, and I have already gotten some great feedback of folks that are listening, and I appreciate you so much for listening and indulging me in this project of mine and listening to these stories along with me. It's such a great experience, and I'm hoping that we can create a little community around this to sort of ask questions and interrogate people's stories and experiences together, because, you know, that would just be really fun to have and a fun way to stay connected through these times. With that said, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I won't keep you any longer. Let's jump into the conversation with my friend Linn Jennings. All right, welcome back to another episode of Queerful. I am here with Linn Jennings. Thank you, Linn, for joining me and having a conversation today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
So I read in your bio, and I did know this just from like Facebook, but that you are no longer in Madison, and that you are in Austin, Texas. When did that move happen? Was that during the pandemic?
Yeah, so my wife got a cool job in Austin, and we were like, great, we'll move to Austin. And I was excited about the music scene. We actually visited Austin the weekend before everything shut down. So we came and visited, and we're like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
We saw live music, and then everything kind of came to a halt. But we decided to keep going with the plan to move to Austin because I think, like a lot of people, we were a little naive about how long this would be happening.
Yeah.
So I think we were like, just made the best decision we could with the information we had at the time, and moved to Austin in June. And yeah, so we've been, I guess, quarantining here in Austin in warmer weather. So I guess I don't really have too many complaints.
Yeah, at least right now, that's probably a plus.
Yeah, except we did get snow last week or over the weekend, which was just bizarre. Yeah. But yeah, so we've been in Austin and just working, and I've kind of tried to do what I can music wise, while not knowing anything about Austin music scene at all or having any way to get involved.
Yeah, that must be weird because I love Austin. I've been just a couple of times, but I have an aunt and a cousin that live there. And when I think of Austin, I think of like really vibrant arts scene in general. And to move there and be like, there's this art scene, but also it's not happening right now. So, but at least you're situated for when you can to make some cool connections. So that's exciting.
Yeah. And then, it is. At least, it's exciting. There are some, there's always like outdoor music options, and we went to one just because we were like, we need to do something.
Yeah.
We don't know anyone. So,
right.
It's exciting to think about what will come in Austin, and hopefully it all come back, kind of like other cities, and that venues still exist and all that.
Yeah, that is what I am hoping and praying for, is that our venues will still be there and that we'll still be able to do live music, even though it'll probably look different, but there's still people making music, so there has to be a place. We'll find a street corner if we have to, but
yeah, no, that's true.
So I also have noticed and been listening to the stuff that you've been putting out. Speaking of making music, you have been writing and recording, and you just put out 2 or 3 singles just very recently, right? And So tell me what that's been like. How has the recording process been in this, moving to a new city, a new state, but still trying to put out music in the world? How's that been for you?
It's been interesting and actually really fun. The week that the office that I was working in Madison moved remote, um, I was supposed to, a few weeks after that, drive up to Minnesota and record some stuff with my friend who now lives up there. And we've done a lot of music together in the past and done some recording. And then I kind of figured that probably was not going to play out super well. And so I kind of last minute purchased this little setup from Focusrite and just have like a basic setup and was like, what if I try to record the music myself and then I send those files to my friend and he can add his part and mix them. And he has a lot more expertise with mixing and mastering and a better program for that. And so that was kind of my introduction to it, kind of like a crash course. And like I had done a little bit. My wife has a MacBook, so I've like tested around with GarageBand, but never with real mics. So it was always just trying to test out things before recording with someone else. And now, yeah, so I didn't really know what I was doing, but I kind of built on that and learned a lot from my friend about mixing, and then started recording some of my own stuff, but then also recording covers to just learn and be like, okay, if there's a song I like, how do I start recording my parts and then adding in the bare minimum percussion that I have of like a tambourine and a shaker and piano, and try to make it into a song and just kind of learn about production that way. So it's been a lot of fun. And then I did actually kind of throughout the whole process, right before Thanksgiving, got inspired to write a song about spending the holidays alone. And so I recorded and mixed that myself, and then my friend Dan did all the mastering for that. But that was kind of my first recording and mixing myself that I put out onto Spotify. So that was a lot of fun and kind of a win for the year to get to that point.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, I loved that song. All the stuff you've been putting out has been great, and that's really cool that you've been able to sort of gain some new skills, sort of out of necessity, but like it's fun to play and do the editing stuff and figuring that out. And it's always great to have connections of people who can help you in that process.
Oh,
as
yeah.
Well.
Yeah, no, it's especially I think with mixing, it's such I mean, some of it, obviously, a lot of it is just you listen to it yourself and figure it out. But sometimes I'm like, I want it to sound like this. And I have no idea how people do that. And it is nice to have someone be like, you need more vocals. Like, it can't just be you. So, or, whatever tip it is.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely a learning curve. It's because it's a lot of like just knowing the right buttons to press and knowing the right settings to add in order to get the sound that you want, but I mean, all it takes is a microphone and a computer, I guess, and eventually you get there.
Yeah, no, that's true, but there's definitely a learning curve.
Yeah. So is that different than what you've done in the past? I know you said been sort of learning. Have you you released an album in February, was it?
Yeah.
That one, did you record that in a studio?
I recorded it in like a home studio with Beth Killey in Madison. Yeah, and so it wasn't not like, I think it seems like the things that you've been recording based on like videos or pictures from the recording that you've been in actual studios. So I've never done that, but at least through seeing the other recording processes, I've kind of learned what are all how do you do all the tracking, and what are things to think about so that your sound is good.
Right.
And then the rest, has been me trying to figure it out. But at least that part was solid of how do you actually record with a mic, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's, so it's been kind of nice in some ways, I guess, to have, I mean, a lot of the things of the pandemic are obviously no good, like have been really hard, but I think in some ways not being able to play music live has given me the opportunity to do music more for myself, and spend time on things that I didn't have time for otherwise. So that part's kind of fun.
Yeah. Forces you to sort of work in your bedroom behind closed doors on stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I've noticed that as well, like with like I mentioned earlier before this when we were talking, like my band Cat and the Hurricane, we had planned a tour that was like smack dab in the middle of when everything shut down. And I wish we could have done it, and that's, you know, a conversation that I've hashed out. But it's just like a lot of planning for a tour is not actually making music. Like there's a lot of like sending emails and like phone calls and figuring out, okay, what cities do we need to go to, like how much gas are we gonna have. Like there's a lot of like sort of administrative, like logistical things that go into booking shows, and I don't mind doing that stuff, but it's not something that I expected or was prepared for when I said I'm gonna like pursue music seriously. Then you're like faced with all these like things other than just writing music that you have to do.
Yeah.
And I guess the nice thing about this year is it's been like, well, I'm just gonna write music. Like that's all there is to do. So
That's true. Yeah, I agree. A lot of the other stuff with music, it definitely wasn't stuff that I would have ever thought about, of how much time you spend writing emails.
yeah.
It's just the part of most of my jobs that I feel like I try to avoid. So now you have to kind of learn how to balance that. Um, yeah, it is nice to spend more time actually doing the music. Um, yeah, like I've finally spent time learning how to play piano again after years of, I don't know, I grew up playing piano and then I kind of gave it up when I played guitar. And then now I'm like, well, my piano is right here all the time.
Yeah.
So it's about time that I actually start learning some new songs. And with recording, I feel like is so helpful to have a piano to fill out other ranges of notes that otherwise are harder to fill out with a guitar. So it's good to know some of that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
didn't have time for that.
Yeah. So I know that the album that you put out in February was your first like full length sort of project. But how long have you been doing music? Sort of either A, how long have you been playing guitars, and then B, how long have you been sort of like pursuing it seriously, where you're like, I want to play shows as like as an artist?
Yeah, I've been playing guitar for a while and originally just basically did covers and would play at open mics and played in college and like jazz bands and stuff like that. So I wasn't really ever focusing on writing my own music. And then I met my friend Dan at work. We were office mates. And I was going through a breakup and he was like, this is when you start playing music. Like
Yeah.
you got to take advantage of this moment. And so I started writing music and I would go to open mics with him. And I didn't write a lot at the beginning. I mean, I guess that's probably like a lot of people. It's so hard to even know how to write a song in the beginning that it just takes forever. And I think I was way more critical. At least now I've just accepted that some of the songs won't be great and that's okay.
Yeah.
But in the beginning I was like, it must be perfect. So I think sometime, I don't know, probably about 2.5 years ago, I was like, okay, I'm going to start writing more music. And I got a few small gigs through Boss Meadery because they're great and allow a lot of that.
Yeah.
And over time, got a little bit more confidence and then put out an EP with 5 songs that I'd written over the course of probably like 3 years. And then decided that I was going to go all in for a little bit and tried to write a song a month for the year of 2019. And so a lot of those songs ended up on the album that I put out. And it just became a lot of fun to write music. And it's a great way to just process everything. And since I think I tend to be a lot better at putting out my feelings and processing things in songs than always in just, I guess, talking to other people. It's kind of my outlet. So it's a great new aspect of my life, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah. And when I listen to your music, it's very like singer-songwriter, emotional, like I love that kind of music. Like I even back to like Joni Mitchell, Carole King, like where you're just like someone just sitting down at a piano or at a guitar, and it's just like, here's my journal of feelings. And I don't know if that's your process for writing, but that's sort of what it sounds like as a listener.
Yeah, no, that's very kind that you would even mention those other names with my music. Those are musicians that I love. And I think a lot of my inspiration is kind of that, like, I feel like I'll have kind of like a feeling or emotion. I'm like, how do I put that feeling or emotion to words, either through kind of like telling maybe a more specific, direct story, but a lot of times, yeah, just kind of telling. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I guess putting just like the feelings into kind of like weaving in different stories into a song. I definitely take a lot of inspiration from people like the Weepies and or even Brandy Carlisle, and kind of, yeah, that more storytelling aspect.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And you just, yeah, you have a very good, I don't even know how to describe it. It's that thing that's not quantifiable, where someone sings and you just want to listen to what they have to say. Like that's what I hear when I hear your music.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of genres, this is just one of my favorite questions to ask musicians, but who are some of your favorite musicians that you take inspiration from right now, who are making music right now?
Ooh. So someone that I really like listening to is Nathaniel Rateliff, especially his acoustic. So he's got like a band that he plays with, and I really enjoy that music too. But his acoustic solo stuff is great. I've been listening to it a lot. He's definitely that kind of singer-songwriter quality, and a lot of just like, I'm playing an acoustic guitar. So it's interesting to listen to those songs because it gives me a little bit of inspiration of what can you do with just a guitar and your voice. And then I really enjoy. I think at this point I'm trying not to be as sad or depressing as Julian Baker or Phoebe Bridgers, but I love their music, and I listen to a lot of theirs just because I think they're in a lot of ways very different, but now I like very much keep them together because of Boy Genius.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of their styles are very different in terms of acoustic versus electric. But I love their lyrics. And then, as I said, I guess earlier, I listen to the Weepies a lot. Even though they haven't put out music in a while, I think their creativity with songwriting and production in this kind of singer-songwriter way is really fun to listen to. And a lot of harmonizing, which I can't do as one person, but I can imagine what the harmonies are.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Julian Baker and Phoebe Bridgers, and I'm glad Boy Genius has sort of like, with them and Lucy Dacus, have sort of like, in my mind, put them all together, but they do have very different, like when I think of Julian Baker, I think a little bit more of the storytelling, like melodic driven, and Phoebe's got more of that like layering stuff happen where it'll start in a whisper and end in a scream type of thing.
Yeah, which is it's so cool. I don't know if you ever listen to the podcast. I think it's called Song Exploder, but now I'm maybe misremembering the name. But I think it's an NPR one, where they like will take any song and then they'll be like, we're gonna break down all the production from phone demo. And they did one of Phoebe Bridgers' songs, and it was just like exactly what you said, where she was like, I have all these layers of my exact same vocal line all on top of each other, so it makes my voice sound more dead. I think that's what she said. And I was like, okay, so maybe not something I want to do. Yeah. That isn't my goal. But then like all the layers of different production that they added to it, and adding like a bicycle ring at the end, and like all sorts of just like, I don't know. It's very interesting hearing what people think of when they think of a song, and like, how do you build sound that way and have it feel natural?
Yeah. I have heard of the podcast, but I haven't listened to that, so I'll have to check that out because that sounds amazing. I love like hearing people's brains in that, like what makes them create the sounds they do. One of my favorite producers is Jack Antonoff from Bleachers. He's produced some Tegan and Sara and Taylor Swift and Lord's first album. But he like has an interview where he talks about that too. He's like, we have like come up with the beat or the chord progression, and he's like, but that's, in order to make it unique, you got to add other stuff. And he like would record like trash can lids or like, chairs rolling and just like all these different things and sort of build the sounds out of that, which is like always so fascinating to me, because sometimes it makes me feel inadequate because I'm like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
But then also it's like, why would I think of that?
Right. And like I don't know, the kind of recording equipment you need to make some of those things sound good and not
Yeah.
like horrific or at least it takes some skill and practice to get that to sound good.
True.
So
Yeah, me doing it in my bedroom might not capture the same magic as when Julian does it or when Phoebe does
yeah,
it.
right. But yeah, no, it is very cool. It makes me think of one of the things my friend Dan did while recording or adding stuff to my song "Love from Afar" is that he and his wife and I think his wife's sister and her husband were all staying in one house kind of as a germ pod, and he convinced them all to like jump up and down on the kitchen floor to create this like steady beat for the song. And he was like, so I just made them jump for a while and I just recorded it and it sounds really cool. And I'm like, I don't know how you did that, but I'm glad you thought of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is fun, the crazy stuff you can do with recording. So
yeah. Well, and then at least you always have that memory with that song.
yeah,
You always
exactly.
like it's bred into it. Like that's the difference between recording and playing live, is like playing live every single time that you sing a song, like it has a different, you're with different people, you're in a different space, and so it sort of takes on a life of its own. And the scary but cool thing about recording is you're like immortalizing it basically. So,
Yeah, no, it is hard, especially when you later go back and you're like, oh, I wish I had done, it's so easy to, I don't know, as you get better and yeah.
Yeah. Always being your own worst critic. I'm sure every artist can probably relate to that, but you see things in your own work that no one else would have noticed, but you're like, I should have done that differently.
Right. Yeah, and no one else will ever hear it.
No.
Like, I hit that but just a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Like action on that note. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
No one knows.
No one will ever know.
Yep.
So one of the things that you sing about a lot is, like you said, you're not nearly as sad and depressing as like Julian Baker, Phoebe Bridgers, and you write a lot about love and specifically queer love. Is that something that you do sort of intentionally, as maybe to like bring awareness to it or because it's really important, or is that just sort of the thing that comes out when you're expressing your feelings?
I think a little bit of both. I didn't come out until I was like 21 or something, but in high school, I definitely, without knowing it, definitely like was drawn to music that was more queer. I mean, I listened to a lot of Tegan and Sara, probably should have put something together. But I think trying to find stories that felt relatable was something I was always looking for in music. And I think once I figured out that I was queer, I really was trying to find that music. And it is hard to come across, especially in the beginning when, you're young and kind of lost, and trying to find queer musicians can be hard. And I think it's getting a little bit easier. I think there are more and more out queer musicians. But I think initially just kind of I was learning to write by writing my own story. But then over time I realized, I think it's important to be able to relate to music and to hear stories that are about queer, like queer love or just being queer in general is really important. And I want to make sure that in my songwriting that's represented, even if it's not explicit, that it's at least implied, hopefully because they're just seeing me on stage and I get to talk about the music. But making sure to mention that I'm writing songs about my wife and not just some random person that has no pronouns and no one knows anything about them.
Right.
Um, but I like to make that known so that um, yeah, they know a little bit more about the story. And I think yeah, kind of not that I have much of a following, but in my head I'm like, at least the more queer musicians there are out there that are telling their story, the more that other people have to choose from in their music, and it's not just one band.
Right.
Yeah. Not that I don't love Tegan and Sarah, because I really do, and that in my head for a long time was the only band, along with like Ani DeFranco and a few other people, that I was like, these people have queer followings, and I don't know about anyone else. Um,
Yeah.
so that's yeah, and it seems like something you guys focus on a lot too in um, your band, and I think a lot of queer bands seem to be trying to do that more and more, um, whether it's on the local scene or bigger of followings.
Yeah. Well, and I would like to think, if I could ask them, that Tegan and Sarah would say that they are glad to not be the only option, if that's the right way to describe it, for people to listen to, because, that's sometimes in mainstream culture, people tend to talk about representation like it's this checklist that it's like, okay, well, once there's I remember when Love, Simon came out, and it was a big deal because it was one of the first sort of like big budget movies of its kind that featured like a same-sex couple as the protagonist, where they actually kissed on screen and all these things. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, is this really the first one that first of all, but also that it's like, so now I hear, I'll say straight people, but like people in general, like talking about queer representation and being like, oh, you want queer representation? Well, you should watch Love, Simon. It's like, well, it's a queer movie, but it's also like a rom-com. So like, what if someone doesn't like rom-coms? Like, you should still be able to watch something that has queer representation, even if you don't like rom-coms. Like if you like thrillers or, and so I think about that with music a lot, where it's like, if you don't like Tegan and Sarah's music just because that's not your style of music, that should be okay, and that shouldn't be the end of your options to like see yourself represented.
Right. Oh, that yeah, no, that's a really good point, right? And like, not everyone is drawn to sad kind of emo
Right.
90s music.
Although there is something that seems particularly gay about that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not everyone.
Right. There should be room for happy gay people,
Yeah. There I won't gatekeep if there's happy gays. You're welcomed. Yeah. No, but that makes a lot of sense, that, just like being open about the fact that you are writing from this perspective, and that doesn't necessarily mean that every single song is about like being queer, but like, I think that does come across. And I know that you often have like a rainbow strap on your guitar when you're performing, and just those like little things that like make it clear that it's like, for especially like queer kids, or just people who maybe don't have a lot of support in their lives, to see like, oh, this person is like me, and I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, no, I feel like I didn't know that there were guitar straps like that, and I went to a concert with Esme Patterson. I don't know if you know her music. And I was like, that's so cool. And then obviously Julian Baker does. And then my friend Dan got that for me, and I was like, yeah, I should be doing that. I should be doing what these musicians are doing.
Yeah.
And I think I'm trying to remember now if Kat
Has one. Yeah.
one. Yeah. So I feel like, yeah, it's a good, especially in Wisconsin or places, where, it maybe doesn't always feel as safe to have someone on stage who's saying, no, I'm making this a place for myself, I think can matter a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask that as my next question. Have you ever experienced that, like feeling like certain venues were off limits to you, or like feeling like being open about your queerness? Do you feel like people were generally pretty accepting of that in the music world?
I think at least like initially being in Madison, it felt like it was pretty okay at every venue I ever played at and open mics. I know I was a little bit more worried about it when I started reaching out to like I would see that other musicians in Madison were playing at these other venues, and so I'd reach out and try to play, and I never really knew, what kind of clientele would be there. Um, and I'd always kind of try to feel it out once I started playing. But I was also like, well, I'm wearing a rainbow, so I don't, I'm not gonna like change that. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like usually what actually seemed to work really well is when I have a few songs where it works really well to talk about being queer and kind of like playful ways talking about like this is what this song is about and not making it a big lecture. That seemed to actually draw a lot of people in who otherwise didn't seem intrigued at all by what was happening on stage. And then they
Yeah.
were suddenly like, oh, there's a story behind the song, whether they got or cared that it was a queer story. But it seemed to kind of open up people a little bit to it. So I think, at least in the bounds of the Wisconsin, like kind of Madison area, it felt pretty safe. And playing in Chicago always felt safe. I don't know how it would be, I guess, to be in smaller towns, which I'm sure if you were planning a tour around the Midwest could feel a little bit more imminent. But
Yeah.
so far it's been pretty good, which I can't imagine is the like normal feel generally across the United States. I think Madison, we get pretty lucky.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And I mean, it also does make sense that people sort of flock to those cities from other places that want that sort of space that's very open to everyone. So, sort of by nature of it, it does seem, yeah, that's generally been my experience too. But you never know. I mean, I know there's still plenty of people in this country who would see a rainbow guitar strap and think this isn't for me, but hopefully less and less that is the case.
Yeah, I hope so too. But I haven't played in Texas, so I have no idea. Yeah, I think you're right that there's plenty of places in the country that need a little bit more time.
Yeah. Well, and Texas is a great example because I'm sure there's lots of places in Texas that, you might be apprehensive of, but at least in Austin, like Austin, I'm sure is maybe not everywhere, but has a lot of a large queer scene from what I know of Austin. So
Yeah, no, that's what it seems like from following people on Instagram and seeing where they play and being seeing that there really are a lot of great venues and a lot of cool queer musicians coming out of Austin.
that's awesome. Do you have a favorite venue that you've ever played?
Ooh.
Or venues?
No, that's a good question. I feel like in general in Madison, I really enjoyed playing at Boss Meadery. I think sure there are places that have fancy sound systems and all of that, but I think part of what makes a venue is just the people who show up, and I think they always brought in like great people. Like great people would just come through because they were like, I like live music and I have no idea who this person is. And I always got really big crowds there. So Boss Meadery is definitely a favorite in Madison. I had a lot of fun. I was part of the Overture Rising Star show, and so I got to play in the finals at the Overture Center, which was pretty fun. It was just kind of crazy being on like a real stage, not just a stage that they build for a venue that you're still pretty close to the audience level, and to be that far from the audience and not see the audience felt kind of surreal, and was able to get some good audience participation. And I was like, this is probably how it feels for real musicians when they have a real like huge fan base. And so I think that was just kind of fun to test out what does that feel like to be on a big stage, since most of my experiences are in bar-like venues.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you played at the Overture and when you play like those bigger venues, is it just you and the guitar? Have you ever like had like a band or anything, or is it just you?
So I used to play in a band before I started writing my own music, and they were based in Milwaukee. And so we did play at Pride there once, and so got to play with the band. And that definitely feels way more secure when you have other people with you, that you can just look at kind of to be like, is everything okay? Like, are we doing this right? Because I think generally I just play by myself, and when it is just you, it's if you mess up, everyone hears it because there's no other instrument covering it up. Um, and yeah, I feel like playing by myself has made me a lot better at faking it when I'm worried that everything is going wrong, and I'm just like, I'm gonna keep smiling.
Yeah.
It's gonna be okay. So I think that definitely has helped with the bigger venues, or at least when I was playing with the band, we played some bigger venues, and that was very helpful to have some other people on stage with me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's definitely a vulnerability when it's just like you and your instrument. But again, I think that goes back to just like with recording, there's a lot of things that you notice that no one else notices. That happens to me all the time where it's like, oh my gosh, I completely just played the wrong thing. And then I realized no one else knows this song, so they don't know that I played the wrong thing.
It's so true. I've definitely had moments where I'm like, I just sang the third verse, but I'm only on verse one. So I'll just start singing the other verses and I'll end it. And I know the story is in the wrong order, but I know half of you aren't listening, so it's okay.
Yeah, no one noticed. Yeah, no, I feel that.
Yeah. It's good practice for, one day when everyone knows your words. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a it's only happened to me a few times with our song Over You has like this big choral bridge, and so the few times that we have played it where people do like sing along, it's always such a weird feeling to hear people singing along with you. I'm just like, this is, or even just like getting people to clap or like getting people to participate is so weird, because it's like, this was just something that I wrote in my bedroom on a guitar, and now other people are like singing along with it.
yeah, no, it is a very cool feeling. And I could see that with that song. I feel like it has that drive where you want audience participation, but yeah, it's shocking when it comes through. Also, it's kind of like they take over. I know I've had moments where people start clapping and then they clap faster, and you're like, okay, like I guess we're just gonna spontaneously go out of control here.
Yeah, when you let the audience set the tempo and or lack thereof.
But it is fun to have that kind of communicate. Or I mean, that's what makes, I think, live music so fun, is that you feel like you're part of the music experience with the audience, or in the audience with the band that you're watching.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I really miss about it is, I'm grateful for live streams and I'm grateful for recording, but there's just something about when you're in the same room, like you're not just listening, you're sort of part of the experience, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. One day.
One day. Look forward to it. So with that, my next question was, looking forward, we don't know when the pandemic will be a thing of the past, or at least something manageable, but looking forward to it when it's safe to play music again. What is next for you as an artist? What are some of your next steps?
I'm not actually really sure yet. I think I would like to keep playing music live a little bit. I think I've performed a little too much in my last year. I think because I was recording and trying to save up, as a lot of musicians are, you're recording to be able to, or you're playing to be able to pay for your recording.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of enjoyed this break of just being able to focus on music a little bit more as just a thing for myself. But I would like to get kind of involved in the music scene again, mostly because I think I've met so many incredible people and people I like to spend time with through music. And I think whether or not I'm playing music all the time, I think it's just a great community to be part of. So I'll have to kind of see what happens, and how out of practice I am with playing live by then. But at least doing, open mics again and meeting other people who enjoy playing music, and seeing what kind of builds from there. But I think otherwise, I think just trying to make music more of a priority just in my own spare time, going forward. And then who knows what'll happen from there. I know it's different for musicians who are, it is kind of your full-time gig, and would like it to be a real full-time job. But I think for me, it's becoming a little bit more of a hobby to process everything in the world, and I'll see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you have a whole new city full of people to be able to connect with once you're able to.
Exactly. And hopefully one day people will visit, or
Yeah.
other bands tour, come through. So
Yeah, absolutely. And Madison misses you, and I mean Madison misses everyone right now because we can't see each other. But in my head, you're still a Madison musician, so
I appreciate that. I like being involved in some of the Madison music things too, like your huge New Year's Eve slumber party and all that. Makes me feel like I'm still part of a music community, even though
yeah,
we're all very separate right now.
yeah, yeah. No, it very much is a community. That's what I love about local music. That even if it's full of people, sort of mixed of people who want to be like full-time musicians and people who really are just like sort of doing things on the side, but everyone's sort of united in that, that passion for music. And that's why I love so many of the small venues, like you said, Boss Meadery and Cargo Coffee, and like all these little bars and coffee shops that are just places that I can't wait to be at again.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. Is there anything else that you want to leave as a word of encouragement or advice, or anything that you want to part with before we wrap up?
Oh man. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I have any good advice, but I guess just, yeah, keep on, I guess, kind of just getting through. That's kind of like, I think I just try to keep reminding myself that at some point it will be better,
Yeah.
but I don't know when it is. So I'm just going to kind of take a day at a time, and listen to a lot of music. That's basically what I do in my free time now, is just, I look forward to every Friday when there's like new releases. I'm like, yes, like this is what I live for now. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One day at a time. All right. Well, thank you, Linn, for joining me. Thank you so much for sharing about your music and about your journey. And I'm very excited to see what you do once, we move past all of this and you're able to play shows again, and hopefully maybe even hearing some new music that you're as you continue to record and fine tune that process.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, there you have it, Linn Jennings. Linn is such a great person to talk to, and just a great person to be around, as well as a wonderful songwriter. So if you haven't listened to her music, I encourage you to go do that. If you want to keep up with what Linn Jennings is doing on the interwebs, you can follow her on Instagram at linn.jennings. That's the Linn with 2 N's. You can also find her on Facebook as Linn Jennings Music. She is on Spotify and other streaming platforms where you can listen to her original music that she's been putting out there. And please go give her a follow and keep up with the stuff that she's doing. If you want to keep up with me, you can find me everywhere on the internet as Mix Benjamin Rose. That's MX Benjamin Rose. My website is mixbenjaminrose.com, and that is my handle for YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, pretty much everywhere. If you want to get more information on the things that we talked about in this episode, I always have show notes available on my website, where I provide links and lists and videos to all of the things we mentioned. So for this episode, I will have a list of all the bands that we talked about when we were talking about Linn's influences, as well as some of the venues that we mentioned, as well as links to anything else that may be helpful. You can find all of that on my website at mixbenjaminrose.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would be a huge help for you to leave a rating, review, subscription, whatever word is applicable for the service that you are listening on. And that just really helps this podcast find more listeners and, fight the algorithms of the internet. And again, I'm just so thankful for you and hope that you enjoyed this conversation. We will be back in 2 weeks for another episode, so stick around, make sure you subscribe to the show, and I cannot wait until then. Okay, love you, bye!